Those of you who might want to get a refreshment or something in the bar, we're going to have an invocation now and kind of get started on the meal. And incidentally, I'm sorry, my name is Bill Owens, and I'm a past commoner of 1994 Jolly Roger. My beautiful wife Judy and I met on Tony Allmiller's boat. So Tony can't be with us today, but we have our own minister here for Jolly Rogers. Chad Roper will lead us in an invocation. Chad.
I invite you to pray with me this morning. Holy Father, you are a God of wind, of water, and of words. Today we invite you to be in and among us as we tell stories of wind, of water, through our words. And we recognize that you are a God of life. And nothing speaks to life more than sailing. So Lord, as we listen to these stories shared today, as we share this meal together, remind us that you are in the wind, that you are in the water, you are in the words, and you are in the wine. Let this time be beautiful and pleasing to not only you, but to us as well, that we might carry this story, the stories that we hear here today, and the stories of this club forward to future generations. We ask all these things in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. And did that also take care of?
Sure. And the food then. We also acknowledge that the food that has been prepared here is also blessed by the same God who blesses our boats and our wind and our water and our waves. So we also do want to bear in mind that we do have a few folks. Tony Allmiller, who has recently been hospitalized. Tony and his wife Pat, keep them in your prayers, as well as Dave Walborn, who is at the Otterbein Hospice Center in Perrysburg. We do want to remember them in our prayers. So we thank you, and we invite you then to grab some food.
And we'd like our VIPs to could sit along the outside here, and the other people you can find a seat here in the middle. And we'd like the VIPs to lead through the line. So if Ken and John, if you guys want to lead us off. And Don, do you want to say anything real quick? Nothing? Okay, good.
Probably in the bathroom.
There she is. Judy and I met on Tony Allmiller's sailboat.
Oh no.
I was teaching an industry class downtown, and Tony was in my class, and I had a cruising world that I had just carried with me, that I carried around and so on. And Tony walked up and said, "Gee, are you a sailor?" And I said, "Well, I'm more like a wannabe sailor. I don't own a boat, but I sail with my brother," and so on and so forth. So Tony said, "Well, I'm taking a couple ladies from the office out this weekend, and I may need an extra set of hands. Won't you come along and kind of be my helper?" And so it was that. From then on, it's been uphill, or downhill, I should say. Ever since then, Judy and I met on Tony's boat, and I was really saddened to hear that Tony couldn't make it, but I asked Becky, if you want to say something about Tony. Beck, go ahead.
My dad was ready to give his spiel. You're missing someone that likes theatrics, but he is in the hospital suffering from cellulitis in his legs, and he wished he could be here, but we have other plans right now. So I'm hoping that we can get a videotape of him when things settle down with him, because he does have a lot of good stories and he's a great storyteller. One of the favorite ones is when I was out here sailing and I capsized my 320, and when I righted it, the main sheet got caught up on the tiller and it started sailing down the river on its own. And for those of you that remember Jim Pearson, he was a little agitated that my dad wasn't really too concerned, and I swam down to Ottawa River, and there was a big boat holding the top of the mast for me, and I climbed down and I said thank you, and I sailed away. But he has a lot of racing memories. He was a good guy sailing. He's taught a lot of people in the room a few things, and thanks for your prayers.
Thanks, Becky.
Can I make a post-script? Please, Becky, take prayers and our best regards back when you talked to your dad.
Yeah.
He was sorely missed today, so was your mom. And
Yeah, maybe I'll pass my phone around and you guys can talk to him and I'll show that to him today.
But I'd also like to share something. Besides being a good sailor and sharing his experience with a number of you folks, he also chaired the euchre program here at the club for probably 18 years or better. This past year, we recognized Tony's contribution to our euchre program because we had the most successful euchre venue this year. We made over $2,000, which was donated back to the junior program in the euchre program that is now run by the Marriotts. At the end of the euchre season this year, we ended up naming our number 1 and number 2 tables for our euchre nights. Number 1 is now recognized as the Marriott family table. Number 2 is now recognized as the Allmiller family in regards and respect to Tony and his contribution. So please share those.
Now, the briefcases from Toledo Scales, that's still in use. Thanks, everybody.
We want to really thank so many people we see here, and I was really glad somebody that was very active, past Commodore Bill Rohn and Lady Linda are here today, and that's a voice from the past. But I think just to get this started, I think John Greiner is going to kind of take over for the next few minutes and have something he'd like to say. John? And if you want to sit up here, John, that would be perfect.
Okay. Well, I was Commodore 1958. I'll try to get you guys through the first 12 years of Jolly Roger Sailing Club. I've got to tell you how the club actually started, and it has a lot to do with the transom from the boat that started it all. This is for Jolly Roger Sailing Club. I'm donating it to them to represent what it is. And on this plaque it says, built by Bud and Pa Schweitzer with the help of the people that started Jolly Roger Sailing Club. Now what this was, he lived down here off on 145th Street, and they went out in their garage, and Pa Schweitzer was a pretty good boat builder. Later on in the story I'll tell you how they got the Rhodes Bantam started. But anyway, they started to build this boat, and they needed help. So Pop, in his infinite wisdom, put an ice box in the garage full of beer. And so you can tell the reputation of Jolly Rogers started with that beer. So he had all the teenagers come over, and they'd all take a hand and do whatever he told them to do, and keep things going with this transom, and with this boat, I should say. And so they needed a dock for this boat, and they ended up 145th Street runs into Edgewater right down here, and somebody told them, well, it's a street end, so it's free. So these guys built a dock out at the end of 145th Street. And there were 3 or 4 boats docked there, and this happened to be the first boat docked there. And it was that gang that helped build this boat that built that dock. Well, I was a paper boy then, and I was down there, and this old man says, that's my property. It's part of Riverview now, but he says, that's my property. He says, and those kids built a dock on it. He says, I don't care. So he was a pretty good guy. And that's how the things actually got started. Now, to contend with that, Toledo Yacht Club had a junior program, and they charged $25 for these juniors to belong to Toledo Yacht Club. And right at the time that these guys started, Toledo Yacht Club decided to raise the dues from 25 to 50 for the juniors. Well, there wasn't any juniors could afford 50, and they heard about Jolly Rogers, and of course the dues was 75 cents a month. So it was a lot better than 50 bucks. So they came along and we picked up some good members from that group that had already been sailing and racing, and it generated to what became the Jolly Roger group. Then along about 57, next to Schweitzer's where they built the Inner Lake, there was a vacant lot. They got a 14 by 22 garage, but it was finished without door ends, and they built it on skids, fortunately, with the forethought it will be moved. And they built it on this vacant lot that nobody knew who owned it, so that's where the club started. Then about 1948, they came down here and they bought the property across the street for their docks from Mr. Hughes. And Mr. Hughes sold them that part of the property and built a basement here. Never got a house on it, but just built a basement. And so we started out putting that, they built a little bulkhead out, just enough so you could have a little grass to stand on. And they built a dock out there. So I joined the club in 1951. So I was 14 years old then. And we wanted to go to Put-in-Bay. And one of the very good old members, Jim Holowinski, I was docked over here on next door, and he comes over and he says, John, he says, you've been racing a little bit. I said, yeah, and I had raced Maumee River and Monroe Boat Club and Outer River Regatta unattached. He says, you going to Put-in-Bay? Do race week? And I goes, yep. He says, no. He says, you can't do that. He said, you got to belong to a club. Oh my gosh. He reached in his shirt pocket and pulled out an application and said, John, we're having a meeting tonight. I think we can waive the waiting period. You need $9 for initiation and 75 cents for dues. So I had $9.75 and I joined the club. They waived the waiting period. There were two of us. The other guy was Bob Fox, who I think you all know. And so we went outside and I said, oh, I know you, you're a senior at weight, and so forth. And we shook hands and I became good friends with Bob and knew him most of our lives and so forth. So anyway, we went to Put-in-Bay and had a good time there. Got back in the September meeting. The Commodore looked at me and he says, can you start a fire? I said, well, sure. And this is in the little clubhouse over there. They get this little potbelly stove. And they said, well, you're going to be the fire chairman. He said, that means you got to go out and get a bunch of wood and put it in the fire. And you got to come in an hour early and get that fire going so it'll be nice and warm for everybody when we get here. So on Tuesday night, I would get over there with a pile of wood and I'd start a fire. And that was my first job, sailing in a club. And I've been doing something for one club or another forever since that date. And that was 60 years ago or so, a little more than that. So anyway, in 52, I sailed my nipper to Put-in-Bay because there was a boat down out of the river called Long Time No See that was going to tow a bunch of us over. And when they couldn't, the water pump went out about the time they got to Turtle Island. And so we were going to go back. And I said, oh, I can't go back. I got to get to Put-in-Bay. So Jim Mormon and I both took off in our nippers. Well, it turned out to be a really bad night. First of all, as we're going through the shooting range, the airplanes were coming down and shooting at these targets, and we thought they were done at 5 o'clock. Well, it was 6 o'clock, and they took a couple more circles around and then came down at us. And I was at the back of the boat. I was ready to jump off, but they circled around. They waved to us. You could see they got real low, and consequently, they went around and headed back for Grosse Seal and the Naval Air Station up there. So then the storm started getting worse and worse, and we tried to tie the two boats together because neither one of us had an anchor line long enough to hold in that 25 feet of water out there. And so it was a real rough night. I made a lot of promises to God that night. I haven't kept them all. I haven't kept very many of them, but it was pretty bad. So the next morning, it was blowing out of southwest hard. We got put in bay, nothing flat. 10 o'clock in the morning, we're putting stuff away, and this guy helped us dock. Another fellow from Jolly Rogers had just turned 21, Richard Quinlan. Richard Quinlan. And he says, I got a tent right there, there's a cot in it if you want to go to sleep. So I went in and I went to sleep. He goes down to the Roundhouse to get his first legal beer. And he says, he's sitting next to a guy and they said, "Did you hear about Griner? He's lost out in the lake. Coast Guard's looking for him." He says, "No, he's not." He said, "He's sleeping in my tent." So he says, "Watch my beer," and he runs down, wakes me up and says, "Get down and register, they're looking for you." Well, at 15, nobody was looking for me. So I go down and I said, "I'm John Griner, I want to register." And this lady runs around, gives me a great big hug. You know, what's this all about? And then she goes to the desk and she picks up the phone, sits it down in there, and she says, "Call your father, he's been harassing us all morning." Oh boy, I'm in trouble now. So, you know, sometimes you have to tell a little white lie. And so as you know, I'm pretty good at that now, but at that time I had to think, "Oh, hi, Dad. No problem at all. We saw the storm coming. We beached our boats on West Sister. We got a little wet. No problem at all, Dad." Well, that little white lie, the next morning was printed in the paper on the first page. Now, I've been quoted on the front page of the paper 3 times, and every time was wrong. Now, they can't take the blame for the first time because I lied. So that was one of the interesting things. So the next thing, this property across the street, you notice it goes out a nice 60 feet and 60 feet across. Well, that bulkhead was quite a project. Now, my dad started to get involved. He was house committee at Outer River Yacht Club and very involved at Outer River. And so they made a deal with us. They would come down and put our piling in, and my dad had already told me we were going to take care of getting the poles. And so we made a deal. We'd paint their clubhouse. And that was a lot of fun. About 15 or 20 of us went down. Now, we didn't all paint the same. If you can imagine a bunch of teenagers crawling around painting that clubhouse at Outer River, I think they had to personally, or had to end up having it painted the following year. One guy put it on real thick, the next guy put it on real thin, and you could tell. So anyway, the next thing we went to the Toledo Edison Company. My dad made all the arrangements. We borrowed 2 trailers from Louis Boat Works down here. And we went to the Edison Company at the end of Delaware Avenue down there off of Detroit. And we're supposed to take these old poles off of this. My dad was a line foreman. He says, "Don't take these poles. Take those poles there." Okay, so the night watchman that's there on Saturday was one of his former drivers. So he took a bottle of Guggenheimer, which was a real good whiskey back then, I guess. And he went in with a bottle of Guggenheimer to sit down with the night watchman. And in the meantime, we loaded up 2 trailers, and we had about a dozen poles on each one of them. And somehow we figured out where the cable was that we needed for the tiebacks, and all the cable clamps, and all the long bolts that hold those poles around. So we got those, got them all loaded up, got out the gate, we're in the street. I run back and tell my dad we're all set. So consequently, we get these poles and we haul them down here. And that weekend, the next weekend, Otter River brings that big crane down here. And we start to put those pilings in. And this is in the beginning of the fall. So we put the piling in, and they did a good job. At the time they had a boat there that was supposed to tow these poles out. Well, it was getting kind of hard for them to do that. And so a couple of us, I don't know if you remember, Jim Eisinger and I went in the water, and we'd swim the poles out to them. It was a lot quicker. And so they'd pull them up and drop them in and drop the hammer on them and pound them in. And then the next weekend, they hung all of the poles on the outside with the crane off of that. And we got those all bolted on. So fall was really coming. And then it became a big project. We had gotten the oak timbers, and we put the first heavy timbers around the inside. And then to put this wall down, these things were about 2.5 by 8 inches or 10 inches. And we cut the bottom off on an angle so it would make them go tight to the next one. And we had a big sledgehammer that belonged to Jolly Rogers. I don't know if it's still around or not. It was about that big on, square, and it had to weigh 40, 50 pounds, and it had a handle that was welded to it. And 2 guys would take that, and we'd pound each one of these boards in. Now, I was 16, and I didn't have a lot to do. I didn't have a life other than here. So I spent all my time here. We got those things all put in before the ice came in. It was quite a project. Well, we were like, okay, we're done, we got it. Well, we had a big hole in the water. And some of the people were quite disappointed that we couldn't fill it right away. There was a fellow that was around Point Place all the time, Russ Lieber. He had a truck, and he had another, I think his son drove one of the trucks. And then Manuel Casey was down here. And they would, when they got some spare concrete and some spare dirt, they'd dump it here. But it wasn't going very fast. So that year, we had a catwalk across this empty watered area with dirt being pushed in, but this little catwalk to get out to our docks. And so the 53 was kind of weird summer, and I might have some of the dates just a little mixed up, but I'm basically going from memory here. So anyway, we slowly got that filled in, and we didn't pay for the fill. So what we got was free, and a lot of work to it. So at this same time, there was a number of members that wanted to start a new fleet. And the Rhodes Bantam fleet was really what we wanted to do. I was a sophomore in high school, and they went down there and they built 7 Rhodes Bantams. A group, some of you may remember Dave Donkos. He was one of that group. Stan Kelly, who was one of the Commodores, and Merle Summers was a Commodore. There were 7 guys, and they built those boats. Well, I would come over whenever I could and help them. And it was so much fun to see these boats develop. And I was going to build one the next year, which I did. with a lot of help from those guys. Stan Kelly, who is a friend of mine all my life, he was a perfectionist. And I got the boat all set up, and he'd come over and say, nope, John, it's not quite right. He'd measure from here to there and there to here and come out with a 1/4-inch difference. So I'd take the boat all apart, put it back together again. And finally, Bud Schweitzer, who is a part of this transom here, he comes over and he said, what the hell are you doing? The boat's been like this for a month. And I said, well, Stan says it's not quite ready. And he said, give me your square, give me your level. And he checked everything out. You know, now I'm a junior in high school, see, so whatever these guys say has got to be right. So he says, yeah, you're all set, let's go. We put a chine on. And from then on, we kept building it, and everything came out right. Now, that Rhodes Bantam fleet was basically here at Jolly Rogers in between 1953 and when did you build your last boat, Jim?
I would say, I'm not sure.
63, 64,
Yeah,
someplace in there.
63.
Huh?
About 63.
Yeah, 63, now I think about it, it is. So during that 10-year period, we built 50 Rhodes Bantams. I mean, and you can, I mean, today a guy builds a boat, it's a really big deal.
Right.
All the members here, we wanted a boat, you built your own boat. And it was quite a group that did this, and we had a lot of fun with them. The Rhodes Bantam fleet, we ended up being the biggest fleet at a few of the nationals. And Bob Fox won the nationals one year, and Jim won it a little bit later. So we had some national champs in the Rhodes Bantam fleet that were built right here in this area. Then we finally got that filled in over there, and we had to move the clubhouse. Well, this Manuel Casey that had the dump truck, he hooked a chain to it, and we got some pipes cut. Somebody had the forethought to make these pipes, and under these skids we'd throw these pipes and it'd roll, and we'd run around the back, pick them up, and throw them back in the front again, and we rolled it on pipes down to here and set it up across the street at the property. And that was, getting that clubhouse on our own property was really something. Now in the meantime, this property here was just setting, and we didn't know why at the time. I found out much later, and I'm probably the only guy that knows really what happened. When we bought this property, we simply used it as parking for the time being. But we did go down to clean that basement out, and it was terrible. I mean, you just couldn't imagine what that basement looked like, the first half there. And what it was, I met this guy at an AYC meeting 40 years later, and he says, my name's Hughes. I said, oh, you're from the Hughes from, you know, yeah. He says, I recognize your name. He said, I knew who you were. And I said, well, that's interesting. I said, yeah. He says, well, we lived in Fremont, you know. And he says, we were living in the basement, and it was pretty stormy that night. And the next thing you know, I was sound asleep. My dad came and woke me up, and I was on this mattress and I was floating. He said the water was about waist deep in the basement. And Mr. Hughes was a mechanic for the Cadillac dealer. He always had an old Cadillac. So he's sitting out there, and he's putting the kids in it, and he says, my dad says, get in the car, we're going to Fremont, to Grandma's house. So they left here, and locked the door, and never came back. I mean, this place, whatever happened to that water and all that stuff, the bed, floating beds, and that was in there and closed up tight for 2 years. And we came here, Mr. Lieber had his dump truck, and we went down. I was 17 or 18. I could not stand it. I mean, I came up, I worked on the upper part. I couldn't be down there. These guys would shovel it and throw it in a garbage can and pass it up to us. And we filled up a dump truck full of garbage. And so anyway, that was the beginning of this era of the club having some property of its own. We just used it for the parking, that was all. When we bought this property, I think we paid $2,500, and that just, you know, to the fence bed, where the fence line would be back here. So at that time, there was a 3% return on tax stamps. Now, I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember tax stamps, but when you bought something, the store dealer was supposed to tear them off and give them to you. These tax stamps were 3%. So there was a rebate to make people want to grab those of 3% on how many you return. Well, there my dad came into the picture again, and he was the kind of guy that knew a whole lot of people. And some of these merchants had to buy these stamps to cover their stuff, and then their people would forget to tear them off and give them to them. So they had boxes of these. Well, my dad would pick up these boxes. And so we'd have a muskrat dinner at our house. And we'd bring home 7 or 8 guys, and we'd sit all night tearing these stamps off, stacking them, and put them in a box and sending them back and getting the 3 cents off of every $10 or whatever it works out, 3%. So anyway, that's how we accumulated most of the money for this, to pay for this property. And so it was a lot of fun, and we were still having a lot of sailing. In 1958, I became Commodore. I was 21 years old. And Jim was the only guy here I see that was, oh, Tom Strong, he was around. And Connie. So you got 3 of us here, yeah. Anyway, they elected me Commodore, and we used to take and swing around on a hoist out there. And I would run and grab the hoist and go around and get back. Well, these guys, he's one of them. When I started to do that, they all ran out and stopped the hoist. And I'm hanging up there. Guys, I got my billfold in my pocket. So anyway, down I came finally and waded in. And I haven't forgiven him yet. But, so anyway, that year, Outer River's Regatta was a really big success. Outer River had over 100 boats in a race, right here in the river. They started at the end of their club, go down to Weber's, back up to the bridge, and back down, sometimes twice around, sometimes once around. I can't remember what that was exactly. But that night of that regatta, we had 100 boats at that dock. I stood there in the bulkhead and I counted boats. And we had over 100 boats docked here at Jolly Rogers. There was probably 20 Rhodes Bantams. There was probably 25 Interlake sail. There was maybe 10 Lightnings from TYC. and probably 20 nippers. But, and then a few sundry different boats. But if you can imagine 100 boats off that dock, and things were really, really a lot of fun here, and I miss the times. I've been sailing for 65 years now, and I've been a member up at North Cape for 52 years. I'm sorry I left Jolly Rogers, but you just didn't have the water, and we were trying to get a thistle fleet going up at North Cape, and that's when I went up there and sailed a thistle. And I can't think of anything more I want to say, but that gets you through the first 12 years.
Bill, can I say something? Yeah. Don Shallots, are you here? Where are you? Is he out there? Don, can we get a picture of you with John accepting this? This is to me, quite an honor, and we're very grateful. I speak from all the current club members. We will find a home on the wall somewhere and put that up there with a whole lot of respect, and thank you very much. But can you, as the last Commodore, accept that?
This plate explains it a little bit. What this plate says is transom from Interlake number 133, the Fantan. Built in 1946 by Bud and Pa Schweitzer, and the help of the people that started Jolly Roger Sailing Club. And the first boat to dock at what was called Jolly Roger Sailing Club at the time.
Hey, I'd like to say one thing. John, you said you left Jolly Roger. You've never left Jolly Roger.
No, that's a fact.
Right.
He's here all the time.
I think he's also told us where the original pirates from Jolly Roger came from. Your dad must have been quite an original pirate. The way he got stuff for nothing.
It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Wow.
I joined Jolly Roger Sailing Club in 1957, the same day that Denny D-Ball joined. We both at that point sailed little nondescript boats for over 13 feet long, and we would sail every day that you could sail. You just come down here and sail out the end of the river, go swimming, come back. My dad was a boat builder, unfortunately built me a Rose Bantam a few years later. And at one point we had probably 20 Rose Bantams on rafts out here. We didn't keep them in the water, we'd pull them up on a raft. And some of the other things that were great fun is there was a regatta every weekend of the summer. There was a regatta somewhere. It was here, Bayview, Monroe, up the river. Well, we didn't have trailers, most of us, so we would organize tows. Some of John's dad's buddies had a big fish-type boat. They'd say, be out in the river at 5 o'clock, hook up to the line. They'd tow us from here to Monroe or go the other way up to Monroe or Maumee River Yacht Club. Great fun. I mean, it was just wonderful times. I was hoping John would tell you about the night when you joined the Jolly Roger Sailing Club back in '57. You were a regular member. You were a voting member, not unlike today where our juniors are just have their own entity. And we controlled the vote the night we elected John because we had a whole bunch of kids in this little clubhouse. Who are we voting for? Grinder. We voted them in and took them out and hung them.
He came back for more.
My first encounter with John was we were at the CYC sweepstakes, and there was a big crowd around his Rose Bantam. Well, he'd sprayed the inside of his Rose Bantam with speckle. Who would do that to a wooden boat? John Grinder would.
I've never heard that story.
Later that year, we went to the bay. We sent the we couldn't afford to send the car over to Put in Bay, so we launched the boat at the end of Catawba, and sail over. We didn't care what the hell the weather conditions were like. We just, and sail back at the end of the regatta, because everybody kept the boats in the water over there at that time. That's about all I had to say, really. It's been a wonderful experience to belong here. I was a member, not a member. Ollie Horning would sort of traditionally throw me out for not paying my 75 cents. And I'd have to beg him my way back in and pay my 75 cents per month. But it's been a great experience, and any questions, I'll be...
Jim,
Yeah.
I think we're really blessed. We've got two of the premier local boat builders in our locale who have probably got innumerable number of boats under their belt, and I know that John built more than he can remember, and Jim has built one that has actually won, I believe, the Mills, the Orange Crate, hasn't
Out
it?
of the year, the
Part of the-
Iowa 8 out of the year.
So,
I have another great story about John Greiner and boat building.
It's turning into a roast.
When Billy Harrison passed away, Harrison's Marine is named after, he had an old truck. I don't know what year it was, a
37.
37 truck. Well, that was John's work truck. Problem was, it didn't have any brakes. So we'd load up 4 or 5 guys in the back of the truck, and when we had to stop, we'd all bail out and hang on. We'd go all the way across town to Davis Plywood and pick up plywood and come back. We made it every time. I don't know what happened to that truck at some point, but it should have been in a museum.
Well, the bad deal about that truck, the engine went out. And Bill Baumker, who was a member here, said, John, I wrecked that 48 Dodge car, and he says, you know, that's the same engine. So we come over here, and we get in the crane. This is in the fall. So they start to pull the engine out. Well, these are Jolly Roger mechanics. And they couldn't get the clutch pedal off, so they pulled out a hex on or so on. Well, I knew that the jig was up, and I had paid Bill Harrison $50 for this truck. So this guy that collected cars, we had an engine that wasn't quite out of the front, and we had another engine in the bed of the truck. And I had paid $25 for that other engine, and he offered me $50. And I said, well, yeah, I wished I hadn't sold it.
Some of the other interesting things is when we launched boats, everything was hand cranked back in those days. The hoist was where it is now, but there was no motor on it. You just cranked by hand. And it's just the way we did it. So, anybody else? Yeah.
Did you build that road, is that a Rhodes Bantam you sail out here on Thursday night?
That is a Rhodes Bantam that I didn't build. That's a fiberglass hull. Most of the ones we sailed earlier were all plywood. But that is a Rhodes Bantam owned by a former member here, Leo Meadler. I bought it from Leo's wife several years ago. Still great fun to sail.
Yeah.
I might add on the towing up the river, Kenny Saban's here, right, someplace?
Yeah.
It was his dad that did the towing. Now, his dad was quite a character and started at Saban's dock down there. And I would run around and figure out who was going, and it was, so there'd be 15 of us or thereabouts usually, and I collect $1 from everybody, and we'd give it to Chet, and away we'd go. Well, Chet would spend the night there on the boat and partying and drinking and so forth. But you didn't give him the other $15 for coming back. You would go collect that again at the regatta at Toledo Sailing Club or Maumee River, and then you would go with him. And at that time, Otts had gas down there by Walbridge Park. We'd go over to Otts and we'd get the gas, and I'd pay for the gas with the $15 that I had just collected from everybody, so we knew we could get back. And, but Chet was great, and it was quite a bit of fun. Some of us got lucky enough to have a girl go with us, and it was a great time towing up the river in the evening, on Friday evening, and seeing all the things go on the river, and then tow back, and it was a great time.
Good times, good times.
Thank you, Jake.
I joined here in 1952, the year I got out of college. I always wanted a sailboat. When I was a little kid, I used to cut pictures out and put them in my scrapbook. So I bought a beat-up old Lightning. Didn't know anything about it. It took me about a year to fix it up. There was holes on the side. My dad helped me quite a bit because he was a woodworker also as a hobby. But I came out here and never heard of this place. Didn't even know the Ottawa River existed. But my uncle used to go fishing. His brother had a place up the road. So he says, there's a sailing club out here. So I said, oh, good. So I came out here and joined. Tom Long or Jim Holowinski was a commodore at the time. So I bought the boat out here, and I didn't know what to do next, so I was fussing around. And so either Tom Long or Jim Holowinski came down and said, you been out sailing yet? And I said, no, I got a couple things to do. And looked at me and said, do you know how to sail? I said, I don't have a clue. So they said, they called a couple of guys, and they took me for a ride out in the boat here. I remember going down the Ottawa River, heeled about 3 degrees, and I'm grabbing onto the seat, you know, because I was going over. But that's the way I started sailing. And since I was out of college, I was 21, and I could sign legal papers and all that. So my name is on the original building corporation papers here. But the thing I want to tell you is that since I was out of college, they said, well, you could be the treasurer. And so I was appointed treasurer, and part of that job was the beer chairman. So before the meetings, I used to run down to Keene, before the Captain's Curry out here, it was Keene's Cafe. So I'd get a case of cold beer and run it back to the clubhouse when it was what John was saying when they moved the clubhouse to the bulkhead. So I'd get a case of beer down there, a cold beer, and then we had a tackle box with a slot for honor system. So then after the meetings, I'd open the tackle box, and beer was a quarter, so it'd be 1 or 2 quarters, and stuff. The rest of it was stuffed with IOUs.
That hasn't changed today.
I remember when John was saying when we built the bulkhead, my mother made a humongous big pot of sloppy joes. Everybody had lunch and all that. And I remember when they built the Rhodes Bantams, it was kind of interesting that they had a big chart on the wall, and anybody like John would come in and make a few parts when they could. They'd mark on the wall how many parts they made, whatever it was. And when they were all done, if I remember correctly, nobody knew which boat was theirs. So that when they built all these boats, they got through, they numbered the boats, and then they made slips with numbers, put them in a hat, you pulled a number, and that was your boat. So everybody did a good job on every boat, because you never knew which one is yours. And then also when John was saying about his dad, and was it Mormon, and your dad, and somebody else used to tow us around.
Bud Whitaker.
Yeah.
Bud Whitaker had a big old fish boat. He would tow us also.
Yeah. They'd bring the power boat off the end of our dock, and then a big long line, and everybody would tie on the line. It was like a duck with a bunch of ducks. And I can remember one time we went over to Bayview, and my mom and dad had driven over before, and they said the place was dead, you know, everybody just sitting around there, and all of a sudden somebody said, Jolly Rogers are here. And the boat come in, and I had that cannon up on the deck of my Lightning, and I just kept blasting away when we came into the channel, and the place came to life.
More pirates.
That's about it. I don't remember much else.
Anybody have any questions for Con?
Yeah.
Con, one real quick one.
What?
I remembered, and John might be able to correct me, it was on a tow going to Monroe. Powerboat went close to everybody on the tow and shaking everybody around. and then he came back. And when he came back, the kids threw all the pop bottles at the boat, knocked out a couple of windows. And that was a tow going to Monroe way back when. Were you in that, you guys in that tow?
I don't remember that one.
Oh, it was not a big pop bottle.
He's not admitting.
Real pirate
John
behavior.
said, you just did things, you know, I can remember, speaking of Monroe, racing my Lightning up there, and it was pretty rough, there was about 3-4 foot seas, and I had my two brothers crewing for me, and my brother says, hey, the floorboards are floating. I said, well, it's probably spray, we're getting over the sign and all that, but all of a sudden, it's got loggy. I kicked the tiller over and nothing had happened, and all of a sudden it started going. So we were battling. I said, holy hell, we're sinking. Fortunately, Gold's Harbor was right directly back, so I could remember going downwind back into the channel. We were balancing the boat, and we got in, and everybody came over and helped us. We pumped it out. Well, we blew out about 3 or 4 inches of caulking. These are all wooden boats in those days. And so I took my brother's athletic sock and rolled it up, pounded it in the leak, and then sailed back to Toledo. Took the boat out and fixed it up. But in the old days, speaking of wooden boats, people that didn't know, they were amazed. You'd put your boat in and paddle like hell out to your dock and tie it up and let it sink. And just let it sit there for 2 or 3 days till it swelled up, then you pumped it out and you were good for the season. But, you know, those were good old days. Everybody did everything else. Wow. That's about it. I can remember our dock system. Oh, I was telling somebody up at the bar, I think Bud, our old committee boats. We had a whole raft of committee boats, but one of my favorite was an old Navy lifeboat. It was a double-ender, typical like Bud knows. Bud, he knows all about them. They had big long metal tiller and an inboard engine, and Bud Schweitzer and all those guys. You know, we used to go down and get a case of beer from Keen's and jump in there and used to go all over here. But that was one of the favorite committee boats that we had. That's about it.
Well, that tugboat or Old Navy boat brings back a bad memory of mine. We got down here for a Sunday race, and the batteries wouldn't go. There was a guy by the name of Brubaker. He said, well, I can get the battery out of my car. So he gets the battery out of his car, and I'm standing on one of the thistle rafts out at the end, and he hands me the old battery. Well, the dock started sinking when I got a hold of that, and I dumped it on my pants. And so we set it down, so I jumped in the water, and I rinsed it all off. Everything was fine. And there was a young lady that used to sail around here, Sally Jones. I don't know if you ever remember her or not.
Oh, yeah.
She's doing for me.
Hey, John, do you remember her nickname? Don't say it.
Yeah, this is a Christian organization.
Anyway, we go out to sail, and we're real intent on sailing a race. You know, I concentrate pretty hard while I'm sailing, and I'm not paying attention to anything except the race. We cross the finish line out here at the end of the dock, and I stand up, and I didn't have any pants on. The whole front of them were gone. Here's this girl crewing for me, you know. Didn't seem to bother her any. I got a sweatshirt, tied it around with the sweatshirt part in the front and the sleeves in the back.
Was her name Sally?
Huh?
Was her name Sally?
Yeah. There's
Okay then, we'll. Thanks, guys. We're going to, you know, just a couple things as they're telling these stories.
Con will be here all week, and you'll be sitting right back there. You got more stories.
As they're telling these stories, there are sub-stories that I've kind of heard about these stories over the years. And one of the things that people always ask me is, gee, isn't the address of this building on the wrong side of the street? And when they had to dispel a rumor, I understand, help me, Kenny, if I'm wrong, but everybody used to say it was a chicken coop. It was an old voting booth, was it? Not the original clubhouse, or what was it?
14 by 22 Wesson Garage.
Okay. Well, they had numbers on it, and when they pulled it across the street, they kept the same numbers on it. And that's why Jolly Roger is actually numbered on the wrong side of the street here, because that was from the original thing there. And the other thing I always heard is I was hoping Dick Duval was supposed to be here today, but he apparently couldn't make it. But I understand who had the dump truck at, there was one of the guys at any rate had a dump truck, and one of the things that they filled the bulkhead with when they tore down the old town hall burlesque was seats from the town hall burlesque. And so in the bulkhead up there are town hall burlesque seats, you know. So and I just see other people here, you know, that oh, the only other story, now I'll sit down, you got me in the mood, is Dave Walborn. Since, you know, Dave couldn't be here today, Dave Walborn used to race committee quite a few boats, and I might have the boat wrong, Ken, but I think he was in John Dent's Chris Craft, and had a center cockpit with a canvas bimini, and John used a 10 or 12 gauge shotgun to start the race. And John got all excited when he started the race and blew a hole in John Dent's bimini. And so I remember I was a member then, and I remember we had to buy him a new bimini that year. So, but that's true.
One more to add to that. When we came in after that race, we accused him of shooting a bimini out of season.
I noticed Ron K. Sokar here, guys. Ron and Kay, you want to come up and?
So it was 1970, and we were just starting to work. And Ron worked in Chicago. I worked here in Toledo and stayed at home. And we both kind of liked to golf. So we went over to, what's the name of that course? Tamaron or whatever it is over there in Alexis, on a Saturday morning. And the guy said, well, you can play, but she can't. It was 1970. Things were different.
No women on the course before noon.
On Saturday. So we said, well, heck, we both like the water. Maybe we ought to think about getting a boat. How about sailing? He had sailed a little bit. My folks had, we had a Comet and an Interlake when I was a kid. We belonged to Sailing Club, Toledo Sailing Club in the 50s. So we found an Interlake, and the guy said, you know, if you don't know much about sailing, you probably ought to go down to Jolly Roger, and those folks will help you out. Little did I know. So Ron went and came down here, and of course then it was just a little part of the clubhouse, and he joined, and because that's the way you did it then, and came home and he said, we were just married, I met the nicest man, and that man was Bob Pearson, and he was the nicest man. God rest his soul.
I thought you were going to say Art Storm.
This was pre-Art Storm. So anyhow, so then Bob said, and of course he took us under his wing, taught us how to drink scotch, all the important parts of sailing. And then he said, well, you've got a race on Thursday night. We said, race? We don't hardly know how to put this thing together. But we did, because Bob said. Then he said, well, you have to go to the regatta. He always called them regattas. You have to go to the regatta. What's a regatta? Well, you know, and back then we had one every weekend, right, guys?
Yep.
And so then he said, well, you have to go to Bay Week. I said, Bay Week? What in the heck's Bay Week? He said, oh, you know, we have this thing the first week of August, and we go over to Clinton Bay. And that was in 1970. It was all in 1970, believe it or not. And this year will be Ron's and my 50th year sailing Bay Week.
Oh, wow.
It all started right here at Jolly Roger's Head.
Great.
Because you couldn't play golf.
You know what? I'm so glad for that tournament event, because I think I've had a lot more
Oh,
fun
yeah.
and certainly
Oh.
made a lot more friends and
And
stuff.
Jolly Roger welcomes women.
I know.
Not them, he didn't.
Well, we did. We had an auxiliary back then. But,
Yeah.
and I kept saying, why are we doing this way? Why aren't we all one club? So we finally did let that go by the wayside, and I think it's worked out quite well. Yes. Thank
Ron,
you.
do you have
We're
anything?
glad to have you here.
No, really, I don't know what else I would add. That covers kind of how we got started. We ended up, we joined in 70, by the 72 or so I was Commodore for a couple of years, I think. Back then it was, you know, the little refrigerator in the kitchen with the green tackle box with a hole in the top. You put your beer money in there, took beer out. The beer chairman just came every Wednesday to stock the beer for Thursday night races. We raced in the river then, all the time. And I think one of our first races that we won was just a real light air night, and it was up and down the river and coming back. It was real light. Joe Grabmeyer was ahead of us and had his two girls, I think, as a crew with him, and they were sitting on the low side and had the boat all heeled over, but he had his board down, and he just slowly slid into the mud and came to a stop. But the boat was heeled over, and he didn't realize he wasn't moving. And so we just managed to slide by him. I think that was the first race we ever won.
Well,
Anyway.
thank you so much for your comment.
Thank you.
I think we'll just kind of head on. I mean, chronologically, I don't know who's who. I know everybody that's in the table's got more history than I have. So, okay, let me just, Don Carson, past Commodore. Don, do you want to come up, Don? And
Well, I became a member here in 78 or 79. I started out sailing with ice boat sailing. When I was about 16, I was getting pretty proficient at it. And I always kept hearing about all the guys that are doing really well are soft water sailors. The hell's a soft water sailor? But Bob Francis was a big ice boater at the time, and I don't know, there's a lot of these guys here that were ice boat sailing back then and soft water sailing. Kenny was sailing. And so after I got out of the service, I had gone in the service, came back, and I kept thinking, I'm gonna learn how to soft water sail. I found a penguin that was for sale in the newspaper, bought it, took it home. Okay, now what the heck do I do with it? And there was a penguin fleet here, but by the time I got into it, it had already died off, and I had the penguin for about 6 months or so. And Harry Bodie had his Rhodes Bantam for sale. And so I bought that and got even more proficient at sailing. Then about 1978, that's when I joined the club here. Bob Badman came across with a Catalina 22. We had a huge Catalina 22 fleet out here. We had 25 boats on the dock at the time. And so we, my mother was sick at the time, and my dad and I took my cousin's boat out. He had a 22. And so we're sailing along. It was a beautiful sunny afternoon, nice 8 to 10 knot breeze. We're sailing along, and Dad said, well, you know, when something happens to Mom, he says, this is just about the size boat I'd like to buy. I looked at him square in the eye and said, Dad, you buy it and I'll sail it for you. And then Badman showed up with the 20 with Rum Runner. Wasn't a Rum Runner at the time, but showed up with Rum Runner. We bought that boat and been in it since. Still going strong. had the opportunity to be able to do a lot of traveling with the boat. First of all, up and down the rivers with everybody else towing. Well, I was towing my kids at the time. The junior sailing program was still very strong, but not quite as strong as when the old guys here were doing it. But so dragging the lasers and 320s up the rivers. We were doing 10 and 12 regattas a year, and just having a good old time here in Toledo. Then I borrowed a trailer one time and took the boat to Youngstown, New York. And for the Catalina 22 Nationals in 1983. And we came back, I think we were in second place that year at the Nationals. And I'm trying to think of things that happened along the way. After, I know, 83 and then 84, I was Commodore here in 84, and we had the 22 Nationals in Toledo. And again, in the top 2 or 3, I can't remember exactly what position it was, John Mize from New York had won it in Youngstown the year before, and then he came back here and won it that year, won it in 83 there, and then 84 here. And started building friendships from around the country. And it's been, we did a lot of traveling. I've been very blessed in being able to do that. Kept working through different crew. Finally got a crew that I could take to California. We trailered all the way over to, well, we'd gone to Chesapeake Bay, 86 or 87. Ended up with a second place there, 1 point out of first. Really disappointed with the last race, but that's the way it goes. Then we went to California in 2000, I think it was, and finally broke my streak of seconds and thirds, and we won the Nationals in the Catalina 22 Spinnaker fleet. And then 2 years later, we went back down to Texas and won the Nationals in that class, in the silver class, in the gold fleet, the fleet to win. So we've been pretty good with that, and we had, well, like I said, we had in '84 when I was Commodore, we had the Catalina Nationals here. We had 55 or 56 boats out here on the system, along with our boats, another 20 boats that were out there. So we had like 70 Catalina 22s out here on our dock system. Big problem we had back in that time was we had a fight going with our neighbors. They were wanting to expand their dock systems out, and so they did, and so there was a little tarnish on my year that year, but eventually we worked our ways out of it. We're friends with the neighbors again, and life goes on, and we're all that
2008, and I mean, I'm relatively speaking from the guests that are here with us. I'm a new sailor, and it's a fall series, 2008, and it's blowing like snot out there. And there's another sailor who has since passed, Dick Lighty, myself. We're crewing with Don, and we went out there, and at that time the fall series was a 2-day event. And we went out, and when I say blowing like snot, it was bad. Dick was a pretty avid sailor, but the weather was so bad and so severe it was pretty unstable. And I remember he was going over the lifeline, and I grabbed his belt, pull him back in, came in, and he plopped down in the bottom of the cockpit, and he looks up at Don and he says, "After this race, take me back." And this was the second of 3 races. We went back. Dick bailed out. We did not finish the 3rd race. Came back out with another crew member on Sunday, and we still, with 1 do not finish, this guy was able to get us a 2nd place flag for that fall series. So that's the story that doesn't have colorful language. It has me saving the life of another crew member. So I'm starting to build my own sea stories here. The next day we went out, we replaced Dick as a crew member. I did the mortal sailing sin. I let go of the halyard that controls the jib, and it went up there. And this man's looking at me, and he says, well, how are you going to get it down? I guess we got to put in. Well, we had the marks in the boat with us, and we were going out there, and he says, no, you're going to learn to take the mast down underway going out. So out in Ottawa River, we took the mast down on a Catalina 22, dropped it, rerouted that halyard, put it back up, didn't miss a beat. So I'm saying, this guy's got some skill sets that it just blew my mind. But I did learn call for language that.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Ken, I'm trying to keep this kind of in I haven't forgotten about anybody. When Judy and I joined it's, by the way, back there next to the board of officers is a picture on the wall. If you get an opportunity to look at that picture, that was right, Judy and I's first boat was a Catalina 22. And at that time, and I don't know, 60 or so Catalina, 45 or 50 Catalina 22s we had on the system, and there's a big 27 fleet here, and there's about a 2 or a 3 year waiting period to get onto the dock. And if you want to look at those, I think that's probably about 1986, because that's when I joined the club, but you can look at that picture and see all the Catalina 22s, 25s, and 27s, and at that time, when I always remember this huge big boat that was at the end of the dock, because this guy had seniority, and it was a Pearson 30. Was that your boat?
Fox had a 30.
No, you.
Mine was O'Day 30.
O'Day 30, I'm sorry, it was an O'Day 30, and Judy and I always used, when we would talk back and forth, Judy would always, you know that boat with the sidewalks down the side of it, you know? And Bill and Linda Roan, Bill, you guys want to come up and...
We got the flagpole out front built. A lady named Sally was the ramrod in that, and Paul Carr helped to build that. And Kay Selka was my social chairman that time. I think so, yeah. Anyway, she was, yeah, we got a chairman. She was very important, did a great job that year, so I awarded her a diamond pin. Well, first I had to find a nice mercury dime, and then I soldered it to this pin and awarded her this diamond pin. But before I was Commodore, I was membership chairman, and we had 150 members active and had a waiting list of somewhere between 10 and 15 people at all times.
Yeah.
We were able to take some social members, and that created a problem because a social member would join, and then they would buy a boat, and then they would pass up a member waiting on the active list to become a member. So we had to create some new laws to take care of that. But as Commodore, I was frustrated many times, and at a particular board meeting, I said, let's just eliminate the board and make me king. Well, you can imagine how that went. I had a big fuzzy afro at that time, and my birthday was in October, and my wife had a surprise party for me. And probably 6 or 8 people came dressed as Bill Roan with an afro and a king's crown on his head. But we also redecorated this whole building. My wife was a decorator at the time, professional decorator, and we kind of bypassed a committee, which didn't make everyone happy. But she had the knowledge to decorate. She got everything at the discounted prices, and we got it done. And so I guess it was accepted. These blinds are still the original, 1990. And this particular blind wasn't too short. They replaced the window. But anyway, it was a pretty good year. We got a few things done, and I appreciate it. I enjoyed my year. Thank you.
Bill, is there anything in particular that you remember about your year that stands out?
I remember Bill Owens wanted to,
Kettle on that one.
he wanted to call the new electric gate the Bill Rowan Memorial Gate. No, no, that's not right, not memory yet. No, thank you.
Thank you.
You know, it's amazing, I remember things as we're talking, and then I forget them because, you know, I'm old. But, let me see, Ken Alexander, what year, Ken?
88.
88, okay, then, Ray, what year were you Commodore?
02.
Okay, well, Ken, you're up.
Oh, boy. We want to thank everybody for being here. I started sailing out of Jolly Roger in the 50s. I was not a member. I crewed on a few boats. My uncle, Ralph Lashaway, was one that got me into boating. I crewed on his starboat and had to learn the running backs on that spruce mast. If you didn't set that running back, you would have lost the mast. I crewed with John Greiner in 56. John taught me an awful lot to the positive. We won't tell about him falling off the transom, will we, John? Oh, I will tell us that story.
That's another story.
My first boat after the starboat with my uncle was a nipper, which we would borrow each other's boats around here, as John would go along with. And we used to sail these nippers so hard, we'd sail them under because of the rigging. I got out of boating for a while, and then joined Jolly Rogers in the 80s with a catamaran. Oh, I got to back up one. Sailing with the group in the 60s, I had a Phoenix catamaran that Dick Gibbs built. Went to race at Maumee River Yacht Club. The race committee at that time was older people, like I am, older people. I show up with catamaran, and the head judge would not allow me to race. Catamaran, too dangerous. Sailboats are supposed to go just splushy splush. No, I could not race. Never allowed to race there. Later on, I did get a catamaran when I joined here, and we were out in the bay. My crew, we got towed out, dead calm, and what you guys went through reminded me, dead calm. Everybody's together, just listen to the rigging. I looked across the bay over by Harrison's, and a squall was coming across. I yell over to my crew to get in the trapeze. Dead calm, get in a trapeze. I get in my trapeze. We're at the stern, dead calm. Everybody's looking at us, are you crazy? And I yelled, squall Harrison's. Everybody, of course, then realized it. And I remembered sailing in with the spray off the leeward hull up into the second panel of the sail. I went below an interlake, told him to hold course. He was on a plane and I went below him and I went by him in probably about 5 seconds because of the squall. And around here, the squalls, everybody knows. They come up quick and respect them. The time, another one is Don Carson was very nice to crew with me in a national sailing championship on Indian Lake. And Don was reminded, very thorough person. So I'm doing one thing, he's doing another thing to get the boat ready. So I go down to the boat and I start to turn on the instruments on the boat. Nothing works. Don took the battery out of the boat. That's weight. That's no lie. That's no lie. He took the battery out of the boat. Another time when I was racing with Don on my San Juan, I had 2 6-gallon tanks because I didn't know if we were going to get out there. He takes one tank off, he takes everything off, and there are 3 12-packs of beer on board. I says, what about the weight? His answer was, I know we're going to drink the beer. We probably won't use the gas. And guess what? There was not a full can of beer that came back that day. It's kind of hard to take sailing when I started as a kid back in the 50s, and I still have my miniature 12 meter. Some of you remember my Illusion. I still have that boat today. So it's good, but I haven't sailed for a while. I wish I got to get back into it again. It's so enjoyable. And my interlake that I had was interlake number 5. So that old Woody didn't sail real good. So my dad was going to make sure it sailed better because it soaked up. So Dad had it fiberglass. Boy, was that boat heavy. Didn't race as good, raced better before we had a fiberglass. So I guess that's about it for myself, other than one thing when you mentioned the address of the club. I took over the bar in the early 80s. And I'm going through and looking through all the paperwork, and I'm going, oh my gosh, beer permit. It was for the address across the street, our license. And I forgot who it was, said, we've been doing it for years, shut up. Never got caught. So I don't know if it's ever been changed over, but when I took it over, it still said it was for across the street, not here. So many different times of sailing out of here, so many good times that I will never forget. Seeing the boats, it just, the Bantam fleet that was here, I remember all of them. Internationals were here, Jet 14s were here. What one did I miss, John? Point I'm trying to make, it wasn't a 420s. It wasn't one case, well, this is the only thing we'll sail, or this is the only thing. There was none of this keeping up with the Joneses. We're out here to sail and have fun, and that's what we did. That's about it for me.
Thanks, Ken. Does anybody have any questions for Ken? Con? Do you have any question for Ken?
Yeah, I remember that model you had of the America Cup boat, because I sailed it.
Yep, I still have that. Still have that boat. It's
What's it, 12 foot, was it?
12 foot long. It looked like an old America's Cup boat.
That head was the only thing above the deck.
You steered it with your feet, and it had a spinnaker. It has a spinnaker.
Yeah.
Still have that boat.
Wait a minute, Ken, aren't you the one that said that you won the Nationals and then you got out of the boat and you said, Ken, I still got it? And you said, don't do that again.
Yeah, but Don got me through the Nationals, but it was, I think him and I were one of the oldest ones in the Nationals that time. And we went, the boat was not here at the club at that time, but I have to thank Don from Jolly Rogers. We took 3 boats down from one club here in Toledo, and we came in 1, 2, 3. So that kind of surprised people when they went, where'd that come from? They hadn't heard of us before. So it's everybody helping everybody in sailing. And I'm happy to see some of the people like John that remember those days, because there's not many of us left.
That's part of the reason I think that this whole day was started, because we're hoping to make some kind of a record of this and to save some of these stories. Phil?
I'd like to thank our videographers, Mike Arend up there, and my son-in-law Brad Muckenthaler.
They're doing, thank you guys. The one story, and I want to mention, he was mentioned here today, but it wouldn't be Jolly Roger if somebody didn't mention the name Bob Badman, because you wanted to...
I was Badman's crew.
There was probably 60 boats out there. We used to get a lot of boats out on Thursday night, and Babbitt was maybe 100 or 200 yards west of us, and everybody was kind of cat paws around the boat because there's just no air, and you're trying to keep the sail row. And all of us, there's ahead of us, maybe 100 yards ahead of us, was this pillar of air. You could see the ripples in the water going right out into the bay. And so we were all trying to get over there and get in that pillar of air. And all of a sudden I heard, and Bob Babbitt's boat starts to move, right? And I got up and stood on the gunnel of the boat, and I yelled over to Babbitt, "You better turn that damn motor off, or I'm gonna turn you in." He said, "It's legal, Billy. It's legal. Don't worry about it." Another thing with Bob Babbitt, he was working on his boat, and there was one of the junior sailors, and his name escapes me, but his family were 22 sailors, but he was with his girlfriend down sitting on the T dock. And so here, you know, Bob Babbitt is about halfway up the dock, and he sees these two kids out there sitting on the end of the dock. So he's in the water, he starts going underneath each boat, and underneath each boat, and underneath each boat, and he gets to the end of the T dock, and they still haven't noticed him yet. So he goes down underneath the T dock, and underneath the dock, and all of a sudden came up in front of him and go, "Ray!" And it was because he had this slime hanging out. He looked like the monster from the Blue Lagoon. And the reason I can tell you the story is because I was way up here and I heard the scream. This girl screamed so loud you could hear her way up here. But at any rate, just a few little stories. John?
I got one more about Bob Badman, which Ken reminded me of earlier today. I had a bad day with getting my crew. But my regular crew's mother's dog died, so consequently he called me and couldn't sail. It was out of Rivers Regatta, and it was a big deal, and I had points in AYC, and I didn't want to not sail. So I came down, put my sails on the boat, sitting on the raft, and nobody was available to crew. I went down to Outer River, I registered, nobody was available to crew. I went home, got on a telephone, nobody's home on Saturday morning. Just about that time, I sit in a chair dejected and, you know, shit, I'm out of luck. There's a knock on the door. I open the door, there's this big kid standing there, and he says, "Collect for the paper." I said, "Collect hell, you're going sailing." I said, "You can collect anytime." He says, "Oh yeah, well, okay." So we get down here, and this is the first race that Badman ever sailed in. And he knew a lot about the guys around here, and of course he lived on the water, and he knew about Benny Lashway, Les's brother. He knew he was a very good sailor. So we start out, and Stan Kelly was one of the better sailors. He was out in front. And Ralph Lashway, Les's dad, is in second, and I'm in third. And he's got Benny crewing for him, and they had a nice varnished Rhodes Bantam. And we sailed down to Weber's in that position. And I tell Bob very carefully, I said, when we go around here, we're just going to harden up and start to weather. And I said, you're just going to bring the jib in a little bit. Well, Ralph, Les will tell you, he was a little unorthodox in his sailing. He came around the mark and he tacked right at the mark and went off on the other side. Well, unfortunately, Badman's watching Benny, and so I come up and I go to harden up, bam, the jib goes on the other side. I go, oh boy, you know, and I'm yelling at him quite loudly. And he just didn't seem to understand. He's just looking at me. And I'm going, oh boy. So the only way to get the boat and keep going and stay in a race is to tack. Well, I'm standing up and I'm all excited about yelling at him. I push the tiller over really hard, the boom comes over, hits me in the shoulder, and I go overboard. So consequently, I climbed back in a boat full of mud, and where my feet hit the mud down by Weber's. And as we're going along, Ralph's laughing like hell, and we go right by him. Well, later on, he goes to the bar at Outer River, and he's protesting me at the bar. That doesn't do a lot of good, but Ralph, you had to understand, was that kind of guy that would protest at the bar. And he said that I made him laugh so hard that it wasn't fair. So we got a second in that race.
We're going to move down to table another one. When we started here, another one of the Commodores at the club. That guy was in charge of junior sailing for a long time and was always going to the bay. And they're bringing a family into this. You know, our vice commodore this year is with us. Is their son? I want to call Ray and Barb Gall up, please.
Barb and I joined in '68. We had bought an old wooden interlake. It was not saleable at the time we bought it. And besides that, I was going to school at night, University of Toledo, trying to get an education. So there wasn't really much time. But we joined in '68, and at that time, John was talking about the bulkhead. That must have been the first part of the bulkhead that you guys put out there.
It was the bulkhead that's out there now.
Well, Paul Veligalski.
Yeah, Veligalski.
Paul Veligalski was building a section out when I joined in '68. And that's when Bill said...
About the burlesque seats.
Yeah. Does everybody know where the town hall was downtown? I took Barb there when we were in high school. She was so embarrassed. But anyway, the town hall went in there, part of the old Spicer laboratory, mechanical laboratory went in there. And I take credit for that because I worked at Spicer, and I told them, boy, if you want to dump that stuff, there's a big hole in the lake out there. So they came and helped fill that in. And so that must have been in '68. And I didn't actually start sailing until '72, I think. I finally graduated from the college and got my boat ready. And that was an old wooden interlake, which I didn't sail very much, and I bought a fiberglass interlake, put it there. What else? We used to have, Ron and Kay can vouch for this, we used to have some nice, really nice parties there. We had an old pontoon boat at one time when I first joined, and they would fill that pontoon boat with beer and food and sandwiches and stuff, and we'd go out to the islands out there in the bay, and we'd have a picnic. Speaking of badmen, another badman. I remember going over, we had a party at Packles, okay? And of course the jazz band that usually played there had a piano up there. Well, you know badminton in a piano. He cannot stand to see a piano just sit there. So he gets up there. The place has got this place has other people rather than just Jolly Roger people, although we had a lot of people there. And Badman starts singing his dirty songs. And we had that, you remember that? I'm sure you guys were there. But he had that place rolling better than that jazz band ever did. So, and Badman also taught me one of my favorite tactical things in a boat. We were sitting there at a starting line with absolutely no wind, out of a river regatta, and I'm starting to drift all over. He's next to me. He says, "Oh, just put your centerboard down in the mud." Pretty simple. What else do we have? I had a whole list of things I thought of, but I left them home. The races, Thursday night races, they were well attended. We had a course. We'd start right out here. We had a boat, and I think before I start actually getting my boat in the water and racing, I must have been racing. Oh, is that mine?
Yes,
That's our story, right?
That's our storm calling from heaven.
He wouldn't brag.
The guitar's probably not happening. Anyway, I must have been race chairman at one time. We had this float boat and that cannon up there. We actually used that cannon for a starting signal. And it took blank shotgun shells, in which I paid a fortune every week for blank shotgun shells. I bought them over on, I think, Slovenia Avenue. And the one time it was kind of difficult to do. You had to step on it and pull on it. I'm thinking, darn near blew my foot off. That was probably the last time I was shot. So, but the race course, we'd race. We start in front of the club with a power boat out there, starting. And then we'd go down to the bridge and clear down past the entrance where you turn to go to the bay. So it was a pretty long course, back and forth. And it was a lot of fun. Do you remember? That was a lot of fun doing that. We never missed a Thursday night. We went the first time, and Barb got so excited about it, she says, oh man, I can't wait till next week. So.
I've got a different story.
We did that for over 30 years. Just raced that interlake, so all over the place. What else? I think it was something else too. I can't remember what it was. Oh, you got something? Okay, good.
When I was first introduced to sailing, I was pregnant with my first child, and I did not like it. We were tacking on the Maumee River, and if you can imagine in this, it was a bot boat, and I referred to it as a bathtub. I'm pregnant and trying to maneuver in this boat. Like he said, we joined in '68. By then, we had 3 children. I was 25. He was 28. We didn't really start racing or sailing till '72, and we had boat number 67, which was a wood boat. I can remember putting it in, launching it at the bulkhead. All the boats racing were down by the bridge already, and I hear this crash. And we're out there going to race against them. Well, it wasn't long after he realized that this wood boat was not competitive. So from '67, we went to 704, 1177, 1225, and 1325, which Ron has now. We were very devoted for many years to the interlake class and to Jolly Roger. We've seen many changes. When we first joined, the whole club was the bar in part of the basement. We held all our functions there. It was the ladies' restroom were upstairs, so the kitchen was. There was a men's restroom in the basement. It was thanks to Bob Pearson and many devoted members that expanded this room and the basement itself. We have evolved over the years. We have become very famous nationally, even worldwide, with our sailors. Yep. I hope the club continues. Our future is in the juniors, and we have a group that is willing to carry that on. So, I was going to mention one thing. Don Carson, Ray talked about this pontoon boat. It was our race committee boat. And we were race committee for one of the nationals, the Catalina 22 nationals out here. I can remember on the race committee boat, we had to go to the back because the bow was sinking. It was pretty rough, and that was kind of an exposed boat for a race committee boat. But it managed, and we've had several over the years. So, I guess that's about it.
I think, speaking to Catalina 22s, I think it was Jim Pierce who started the Catalina 22s in our club.
Prior to that, they were doing.
Prior to that, it was South Coast.
South Coast 22, yeah.
It's always.
But that fleet died out real quick when the Catalinas came in, within about a 2-year period.
They broke all their masts.
Yeah.
And our interlake is Jim Pierce's old interlake.
I look around this room, and there's people that still own an interlake, even sail an interlake, people that had owned an interlake over the years. And the interlake class is is pretty strong. We used to go to a regatta with out-of-town regattas with a caravan of maybe 12 boats. Locally, we had a regatta every weekend, and we would go in mass. There'd be 20 of us. There were probably close to 20 sailing on Thursday night out here. When I was first learning how to sail, Kay would take off work. We'd pile my 3 kids in the boat, and we'd go over to the beach. If it wasn't for Kay, I don't think I would have learned how to sail. I have been crewing for a long time, but actually taking charge, I credit Kay.
And you did a pretty good job.
Yes.
This, our cattail regatta, back in the early 70s, it was 2 races in the river, I think. 2 races in the river on a Saturday, and Sunday we would start in the river, sail around Turtle Island.
Turtle Island race.
And as I remember, Kay was in charge for quite a while of our cattail regatta, and we would get 100 boats that would attend that regatta. Comets from Columbus, remember those guys used to come up. People from Perrysburg, Oakland, just about 100 of them.
Ray, did they camp out in the yard overnight then?
Yeah. Does everybody remember how we got this property in the back?
It was the,
Yeah, I came to a meeting one time.
Vince lawyer came across the property. We got it for back taxes.
Yeah, it was in tax default.
It was in tax default.
And it was
right behind us.
our property joined up with this property, but it was basically a keyhole. I mean, none of the other properties had access to it, and so it was a natural.
He used to be the guy who used to, from Maumee River, he had that power boat. He would come out and set up the course for us.
He was an attorney.
He was an attorney.
Yeah.
He was an attorney.
Came across
Barry
the
Savage.
Barry Savage,
Very
yeah.
savage.
And Miller got Savage to come to the club meeting one time, and they presented that property to us, or that proposal. They presented that to us. And fortunately, we took them up on it.
Yeah, I think it was like 2.5 acres, and we basically had the key, the entryway to that property. And so that's the only thing that made it valuable to us, and not very valuable. And so I think the back taxes were about $17,000 or.
Say around 15 or something.
Yeah, it's somewhere in that range.
I don't remember how we paid for it.
So we bought.
You sold on it.
Yeah, we bought about 3 acres of property for $15,000 or whatever.
Joe Bradmeyer was treasurer then, I know that. Is that when we sold bonds?
Sold bonds, yeah, which was just saying with Bob, yeah.
And everybody remembers how we got this portion of the building, right?
Bob Pearson.
Bob Pearson.
My dad plumbed it. Yeah, I remember plumbing it.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, there's a Bradley influence.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna water it.
The Bradleys have done a lot of plumbing for the club.
My house too.
Any questions for Ron and Barb? Ray, I'm sorry.
Ron,
Yeah,
too.
go ahead. Or Ron.
I had a good story. I asked Ray when he started sailing, because I wonder what got him interested in sailing. He said his dad had a boat when he was 8 years old. And they strapped him to the mast.
There was a 52-foot Q class. Does anybody remember a Q class? There was all kinds of development classes. This is back in the late 40s. And it was, I remember, he didn't always strap me to the mast.
Sometimes it was the anchor, wasn't it?
But that was the first boat I ever sailed on.
Ron, do you have any memories? I mean, our kids grew up with this. They didn't have a choice. We started out with a babysitter and a crew. And as soon as the kids got 11 years old, they were crew. And they learned how to sail in various degrees. Some like it more than others, but they didn't have a choice. They went with us. It was camping and it was sailing.
It was sailing every weekend, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It was either Monroe Boat Club or Maumee River Yacht Club, Toledo Sailing Club, Riverview, Ottawa River, ours, and then we also traveled all over the place.
Cooley Canal was down there.
Yeah, Cooley Canal.
Cooley Canal.
You had to tack on that canal.
I remember tacking on that. Oh, Vermilion?
Yeah, it's no wider than this room.
Then a powerboat would come, and the powerboat wouldn't know what to do. The canal was only about 30 feet wide, and we're tacking like crazy trying to take it back.
You know, we were building a kitchen in here, and we needed a stove. And, Rick Huff was Commodore, and he worked at Jolly, or at,
he was a millwright at Jeep.
The Jeep plant. And you remember the old tall office building the Jeeps had over there that they imploded?
Yeah, the executive
Well,
building.
The stove was up in that office, and he got with somebody, and he got that stove given to us, and had it moved in here, so it didn't cost us anything, and it served a lot of years.
Until it tried to burn us down.
Betty, do you have anything else?
No. Well, when we first started, we got the boat and we sailed around from port to port, and we found out if we went to a port and we belonged to a club, we could have an overnight stay free. So Mike Foley at the time, he came into the sales shop a lot and said, "Will you join Jolly Rogers?" So we joined Jolly Rogers, and that first year, he said, "Oh, there's nothing to race committee. You can be race committee every week." We were race committee every week for the first year, and there were lots of different boats out here. It was a lot of sailing, different classes. And that was our first year, and that was somewhere, I think, in between 58, 85, not 50, 85 and 87, somewhere like that. And so we couldn't get our boat here, because it's a Cal 29, which is still going great by the Bradleys. And in 2012, we had to sell it, which has got a good home and a better home than we had, but we sure had a lot of fun. We took it up to the North Channel, just him and I, 3 times, up Detroit River and Lake Huron, and did a lot of sailing with it. So really enjoyed the club and everyone else. That's it.
Well, right now I'm historian for Interlake Yachting Association. So as I'm writing the history for that, I get to go through the old yearbooks and go through all of the different sailing fleets that had Jolly Rogers as far as finishing. And I'm also doing the trophies. And it's looking back at all of the different successful Jolly Rogers sailors that we had. You were talking about Art Berry. He was really, really strong in the late 60s. I mean, he's on quite a few of the Interlakes. I joined in 04, and I was Commodore in 12. And Jolly is a great club. It's very laid back, usually no headaches, no problems. There wasn't. It was my Commodore's year. It went smooth. You just listen to what they want. Forget about everything that you had wanted to do, because it's not about you. It's about the club and doing what they want. And it was a smooth year. But like I said, I hear about the different things that happen at other clubs. This is the great place to be. We just need to get more people on the water. I retired and I live at Put-in Bay now, so I don't spend as much time as I can, but I make it back quite a bit. They were talking about that stove. I was one with that stove for a bunch of years, cooking before the meetings and on Thursday nights, when we had pretty much strong Thursday nights. We'd be watching the weather to see if it got a thunderstorm coming through, and it's like, well, should we go or shouldn't we? And you start selling beers and dinners, and next thing you know, everyone's all nice and comfortable, and if the storm blew through, it was a great idea. But and we made some money for the club. But it's a good home here.
Tom, you expressed in very passionate terms to me the other day about the importance of our foundation of junior sailing. And I'd like you, because you have passion for it, to share with the folks how important it is for us to have a successful junior program.
We are a junior sailing program. Our origin, our history is kids coming out sailing. They were too young to join the other clubs, and they wanted to sail Bay Week. So they started their own. This club, it reminds me of like the Little Rascals and the old clubhouse, and doing what you got to do. They had a passion. This club was created by kids that had enough forethought to write a constitution and rules, and it was one of I heard you were fined if you didn't sail your boat enough. I mean, this is about sailing. It's not about talking about sailing or anything like that. Or it's going out and doing it. It's like, oh, I don't want. We've sailed too much this year. There's none of that here, or back then. It was every day. It was a passion. It's easier to go out 7 days a week than it is once a week, because you get those positive routines to where you have to do it, and it's a good routine. And like I said, I'd love to see this club get the whole idea that they had back then, because they didn't have no distractions. It was all about the water. I mean, it was the main priority of their day. I mean,
our junior sailing program here, when I was a member, was how many adults you could beat, and we used to beat most of them.
and being competitive. So it's like we have to keep that tradition here with the junior program. It's not the Ottawa River unless there's kids sailing on it. And we have to do whatever it is. I mean, without the junior program, Jolly Roger is just a bunch of boats in a yard. It has no soul. So we have to maintain that soul. And Jolly Roger has always had the can-do spirit. And like I said, we can keep it going, and we can keep our juniors going, and we will survive. Sure we will. We'll be jolly good.
Barbara, did you Tom Marriott, you want to stay there? Come up, Tom, and
why not? I can embarrass myself and the rest of you. I guess my first recollection.
Tom Marriott.
One of the twins. Actually, there's another story behind it. We'll get there. We'll get there. Your dad gave it to. It started back in '63 or '64. My brother Jim bought Interlake 113 up the Maumee River and joined Jolly Roger Sailing Club. And the boat was probably, it must have weighed 900 pounds. They had like 30 coats of house paint. And, you know, Barbara was saying how you had a boat that wasn't competitive. Well, we used to sail to Monroe Boat Club on Friday nights to compete at the Monroe Boat Club Regatta. And my dad and my two brothers, my older brothers, sailed Interlake 113 to Monroe Boat Club on a Friday night. 3:30 in the morning, they called the Coast Guard to try to find them. Nobody could find them. They were so slow. They missed Monroe Boat Club. Went past the River Raven. They were way up in Frenchtown. Finally, at 5 in the morning, they finally got them. But that was the early story. And Sokas, I love these guys. And my favorite story with the Sokas. First time I ever met the Sokas, right? They got to the Interlake, and I'm out on the dock, and this is when they had the
This is a Badman story.
I was there. I watched this. This is live television coming at you. This is when we had the telephone pole docks, you know, and they're real low, sinking every which way.
Yeah.
And these guys, they just got the boat, and they were just learning how to sail, right? So they're coming in, and I'm going, man, they're really flying. And Ron throws the tiller, and they jibe and pick up more speed. And the only thing that stopped that boat was the centerboard. They went right up over the dock, and I don't know if you guys remember that. Yeah. I thought Kay was going to get ejected right that, a million stories, but I'll get two quick ones, and then I'll be done. The other one was, I think it was in John, you probably know, when did they build the penguins? Remember when they built penguins in the basement here? They built like...
The OK Dinghy.
No, before the OK Dinghy. This was like 65.
65.
65, they built penguins. They tried to build penguins. And the only penguin that ever got finished was the one my brother Dave sailed. And he sailed it for, I don't know, like 2 years, and I don't know, he met girls and he was done, right? So Tim and I at 11 got a penguin. You don't put twin brothers in a penguin. And this is when Howard, everybody know Howard Pinkley?
Yeah.
Well, he used to run the regatta, right? He always ran the cattail regatta. Howard Pinkley, you know, code flag J, you know, everything going up, right? I mean, and my brother and I, we were only like 11 or 12, and we used to fight constantly. And you guys probably know him.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Pulled out of the boat by Park McRitchie. Because they were going to kill each other.
Right, well, the same thing, the regatta's over, right? We're coming into the river, and Tim and I are fighting, right? So the boat goes over, and Howard Pinkley's sitting there screaming, put your life jackets on, put your life jackets. And we're punching each other. We're literally, the boat is way over here, and we're punching. Okay, last story. My favorite thing is when the club was little, people like Paul Veligowski used to have the refrigerator stocked with Buckeye beer and Stroh's beer in bottles, a little can with 25 cents. Oh yeah. I'll say no more.
So I'm out by myself, and the wind was fresh, just blowing right down the dock. And so my plan was that I was going to sail down the slip there, you know, down between Riverview and our docks. And then when we got, I was just going to release the mainsail, turn into the and stop, right? Well, I knew that I was in deep trouble when I was about halfway in, and I was just going faster and faster. And all of a sudden, Paul Carr, and I think there was an engineer named Bill. We had 22.
It was Tony's friend.
Do you remember him?
Bill.
Any rate, Bill, what is it? Yeah. At any rate, so both of these guys are down in the dock, and both of them start running full bore down the dock to get to my slip, because they know I don't have a clue of what's going on, right? And so I turn in, you know, I flip the main sheet and turn in. I came right up, and both of them were right there ready to catch me when the boat careened into the dock. Well, one thing I forgot to do was bring my centerboard up, and so my centerboard was dragging in the mud all the way through, and I turned and just came right in, and that boat came to a stop about that far from the dock. And both those guys are standing there with their eyes ready to catch, and they looked up at me, and they said, "How did you do that?" And I know just years of experience, I guess. I don't know. But at any rate, Ken, you had something else that you want to mention?
One last one, and you're going to help me out with that one. First off, it's called a centerboard, not an emergency brake. Some of you remember when I had my Sprintersport here at the dock, that boat drew 5 foot 4 inches at the dock. And we go out for Thursday night races and put a person in a bosun's chair so I could heel the boat over as I'm motoring out to make it out the channel. And people would come by in the power boats, what are you doing? One of the crew members, I think, had a few straws in him. We're trolling for sharks. But we'd have to put a person in a bosun's chair to get the boat out the river because of that draft. And every one of you will come in with a story of, put the board down, ran around, do this. Yes, the outer river is a little shallow, folks. That's all I want to add.
Jim, go ahead.
I don't think we can have this part without remembering Ronnie Anderson. John, can you fill us in a little more on Ronnie Anderson? Ron, yes.
Yeah, Ronnie Anderson was really a legend here. He had won a lot of the races prior to my becoming a member. Gibbs Hardware down at the corner had all the boat supplies, and Ron worked for them. And he's the one that told me Don Pinkley's nipper was for sale, and that's the nipper that I bought when I first got into sailing, but because I was always stopping down there. But Ronnie was had a lot of ideas, and unfortunately his ideas got too big, and he couldn't get things done the way he wanted them done, and unfortunately he committed suicide. And
John, would
but
you
he
add?
he was the greatest sailor. Joan's husband, George, and he were good friends. And George went to the Navy in 1951, and then I came along in 51 just as George had left, and became very close friends with Ronnie. And he had one frail arm from polio, and he sailed with one arm. And he always put the sheet line in his teeth because nippers didn't have cam action cleats like on almost every boat today. So all of us young kids, we always had a sheet line in our mouth to copy Ronnie Anderson. And you know, no other fleet could be told just by how they hung on to the sheet line with their teeth. And but Ronnie would tell you what books to read. Oh, you got to go to the library and you got to get this book, and you read that thoroughly, and that'll tell you about this, you know. And within a year of belonging to Jolly Rogers, I became competitive thanks to Ronnie and some of the other people that, and I became a pretty good sailor. I never was good at football. I wasn't too good at baseball, but I found out this was my home. And I thank Ronnie for that.
Don, do you have anything you want to say? Don Schultz?
Well,
please come down here, would you please? Don is our current past Commodore. Current past Commodore.
Okay. Picking up on a little bit of John's comments about, and now I'm a little bit forgotten, regarding Jolly Rogers and how it's always helped me throughout the years, and how sailing is a sport that some of us may not have been the finest athletes in high school or thrown the football or quarterbacked on Friday nights, but sailing is something you can do for your entire life. Here we are in some of our golden years, and we're still enjoying sailing. And you can do that as a youngster from 8 or 6 years old until 60 or 80 years old. And we all know that. I preach to the choir. Spread the word. Let's all try and get some members to come back here to Jolly Rogers. Let's try and get 60 boats on the dock again and see if we can't get an interlake fleet and some nippers sailing. Come out on Thursday nights. We're still doing Thursday nights on the river. Bring whatever you got. Sail it.
And we'll have a stove by one of those.
We'll have a lot of fun. We'll leave my old-time stories till the 100th year. Hopefully I'll be around for that. So.
Okay, thank you. we couldn't have this place without you guys. You've all the families put so much into this club and so forth. And if I don't get to you right away to say something, you know, less same way, you know, I'm just working as fast as I can here. So, you guys want to?
No.
Oh yeah.
With that big building, come on.
Come on, folks. Come on up and.
I'll say something.
Jim's like, oh, thank God.
You talk about Bob Badman. I'll do that. I got another one. But anyway, when the first time I came out, we had a place up north for years. My dad bought it. This on a small lake.
You used to come out and play the organ.
Yeah, I'll get to that. But anyway, the first boat we ever bought was a nipper. And back then, my dad worked for Jim Wayne Plumbing. And everything we did with a Jim Wayne Plumbing truck. Because we were always hauling something or putting. So anyway, we come out to the point, and my dad buys a snipper. And I remember I was 8 years old. And he puts it on top of the racks of the Jim Wayne Plumbing truck. We hauled up north, put it on the lake, go sailing. The thing just sank right where you put it. So, but anyway, so then we got our first interlake in '68, I think, because my dad joined here in '68, and we went out in the Maumee River. We met Fokersons. I don't know if you guys know who Frank and Susie Fokerson. They have the clock shop on Monroe and Douglas. But we somehow got hooked up with that. I don't even know how that happened. But we go down on Wednesday night to sail the Maumee River, and but by the time we get done, all the other boats are out of the water. These guys are all done, you know. So they come up and they're telling my dad, you know, you got to do this, do that. But anyway, so we fixed that up, you know, and then we started joining. We joined here and we came out here and started sailing on Thursdays, and I don't know, Jim, it went from there. You know, we were extremely active here. I mean, I grew up at this club. I mean, basically, between up north and this is what
And
we
you both had kids that were active junior programs.
And all of my three boys went through the program. We kind of combined with North Cape at the time because we got coaches that way. And all three of my boys and Jim's son Sarah didn't get into it too much.
Well, Sarah's never, my daughter didn't really get into it, but my son got into it big time.
But
in fact, he's got
the 29.
He's got the 29 now.
Yeah.
Which was.
And my kids all have their buddies with all the good people they went through this program with, you know, it's countless. And my middle son's a Navy SEAL. I mean, they've been very, very successful. I've had a good run. Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the first years that I sailed perf with my 25, we were in the bay, and we were coming in from RM3, and we jibed at RM2, and we're headed up the river. And I told these two guys that were great jam sailors, but they just had never handled a spinnaker before. And I said, we're going to jibe the chute. And I said, we're going to go around this mark and we're just going to reach with the chute right in, you know. And long story short, it dipped it over and we got knocked down and the sail got all wet. And that was Thursday. So Friday or Saturday morning, of course, the sail's all wet. Saturday morning, Bill comes out to the boat and gets in the boat. And it was just a real light breeze coming down the river. And I said, what an opportunity. I'll just take my spinnaker out, put it up, and it'll dry it, right? So I popped my spinnaker up, and as soon as I did that, the wind obviously started to pick up. And the boat starts to gyrate from side to side to side to side. And here comes Betty running down the dock. She says, Bill, you better get that spinnaker down. It's going to hook around the stays on the boat next to you, and it's going to rip. And the boat's going to come back, and it's going to rip your spinnaker. And just as she said that, rip, you know, rip right down. Well, I just took it to grinders and had him sew it up. But I remember Betty. Betty literally jumped over the ball pulpit on my 25, grabbed I had 2 or 3 sets of halyards coming down in a topping lift and so forth. There were 3 or 4 lines. Betty literally just grabs these lines and starts hand over hand up the mast above the spreaders and freeze that sail so I could get it down, and she just did it like she'd been doing it all her life. And I really wish they were still here because I wanted to thank her, you know, because she saved a lot of sailors, and she sure saved me a bunch of times. And I hope we didn't miss any. Does anybody else have anything?
Do you have a note from Ralph, or did you read that?
I got it handled, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to?
I wouldn't start the discussion without saying, we started sailing lasers here, and that's when Bob Bradley was just fairly a teenager. I must have been in high school, just out of high school. We sailed 15 years of Hobies here with Glenn Blown. A lot of Hobie cats out of here. The story I have is I was sailing Hobies. I kept mine at my house on the bay, and we'd sail around and start the race. And I raced, my wife was very pregnant, and I had J.R. Francis with me, and we raced the first two races of the day. And I got in from racing, and my wife says, "It's time. It's time," you know. And everybody would get done racing. A lot of the Hobie Cat sailors would go to my house after, and we'd always throw a party. And I sat all night in the hospital, and my son Ryan was born. And he was born at 6:30. Come on, Deb. Come on, I got to start. Come on, Debbie. Go. You know. Come on, honey. So, anyways, he was born at 6:30, and I raced home and got in the boat. J.R. Francis had the boat ready to go, and we pushed off, and we sailed all the way around, made the 8:30, 9 o'clock start, 10 o'clock start, whatever it was, and ended up winning the damn race. And that was that. And went to the hospital and came back for trophies and back to the hospital. Debbie never missed me, you know. It was.
You know we're recording this.
Yeah, she understands it. She understands it. I did come in my Hobie one time. That was before Hobie 18s and stuff, and we were much faster on that Turtle Island race and coming back in, and we got just inside the river. Man, and we were ahead. I said, "Oh, we're going to win this damn race." And here, steer, Debbie. So I went down and I pulled the leeward porthole cover off and started reaching down into the cooler to get a couple beers out. Puff comes, the hull goes under, and the one hull sinks, and she just goes over. Every boat passed me. We ended up dragging the thing up on the Lost Peninsula by Ken's house and bailing it out and pushing it back in and coming in, and I still got that turtle trophy. They used to give you a turtle trophy if you were the last one there.
Hey, cuz, one good one. We know, like your dad, my uncle, ice boaters and sail, but didn't you get confused a few years back when you had your Hobie out on the snow?
That wasn't me. That wasn't me. No, that wasn't me. No, it was not me. I wouldn't do that to my boat. The cannon up here. The cannon story. This club got broke in one time, and the cannon went missing. And it was gone for a while. And who knows what happened to it. I know the whole story. I wouldn't repeat that now, but anyways, a friend of mine who was an ice boater, and he started seeing he seen this film of his party in southern Ohio, and he put two and two together. Who was at there? And he seen this in the film. He seen the cannon getting shot off at his party. So we went back to the guy's garage one night and kicked the door open and went and got the cannon back. There was no cops involved. It's just like the word was, don't touch the shit again. And it never did. But that cannon went to southern Ohio and back one time.
I never knew that.
Yeah, no, not many people did, but it happened. I was.
I knew it was gone for a while, but I never knew
we also, down in the basement, we used to hold ice yacht club meetings in the basement when things were going on up here and stuff. And there was a gentleman that was around here. He sailed with Jim and Kenny a lot, Tom Beeman. And Beeman was sitting up in the front of the audience of the meeting, and the meeting's going on. And every time the toilet flushed, in a women's. Guy, Rick Hall, he was Commodore Ice Yacht Club, but every time that toilet flushed, he had a little squirt gun. He'd go, the guy would go like this. What the hell, you know? pretty soon everybody would kind of sit there a little while and, you know, the toilet would flush again and, you know, like, it drove him crazy. You know?
Tom Beavan was a pretty big boy.
He was a big boy. You don't want to mess with him, but it was pretty fun messing with him. One of the
He
things,
danced on this floor. I don't know what kind of music it was, but where there was a lot of stomping going on, this floor would vibrate.
Definitely. I had when I joined Jolly Rogers, well, my family belonged, and then I joined Dave Schaefer, got me to join Jolly Rogers again, and I think 78 it must have been, and he, you know, he was. It was quite a lot of sailing out of here. This was I had to wait 2 years to get a dock space up at Jolly Rogers. The dock space was completely full. I had to wait 2 years before I could get a dock here, and that turned out pretty good. But one of the things coming up is what Tom was talking about is junior sailings, the future of Jolly Rogers and the past too. And this year, I'm proud to say that the Carson Cup will be coming to Jolly Rogers. And this is Associated Yacht Club's Junior Sailing Championships. And the whole series of trophies will be coming to Jolly Rogers. And the whole race will happen in the river. And we sailed last year, I sailed quite a few Thursday nights down here. And we kept getting, every night, we kept getting more and more boats. And it ended up being pretty fun. It ended up being pretty fun times. And I'm really enthusiastic and proud to say that Jolly Rogers is going to have the Carson Cup back here again. It's been a lot of years. Tom, you're on this, I think, and you know, the couple times. Yeah, there's quite a few. You know, a pretty prestigious trophy there, and it's good to see this series of trophies coming back to Jolly Rogers. I'm enthusiastic about this. It'll be here this year. And the year after it'll be in Grove Seal, and then I believe it's the 75th coming up.
That's right.
The regatta will be back here in the 75th year. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. There is a definite future on the way for Jolly Rogers. So,
Les, Aaron Stange is on that trophy, isn't it?
Number of times.
Well, we just started a new trophy with IOYA for the junior, for Senior Bay for kids under 25, and to try and fill the gap from 18 to, usually when they quit sailing at 18 or 23 when they've got out of college, they don't get back to sailing until in their late 30s.
He sailed quite, he was pretty...
He passed, but that junior trophy, or that is now named after him after this last weekend.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of winners that, you know, Jolly Rogers had. I mean, you go through Aaron, and you go through all that old Chris Snyder, and the D-Balls, Ernie and Skip and everything, how many, their names on it, the Marriotts, holy Jesus. You know, talking about, you know, big Jim Marriott, oh my God, I still got his boat, you know. And how many laser days of sailing with Jim, you know, many, many, many days. And
good.
It's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We used to have our banquets at Angelo's Spaghetti House, and they had sizzling steak for $5. And that was our banquet. So they tell me, John, you know you have to have a speaker for the banquet. So Walt Swinneman, who was way above everybody at that time, had sailed his dragon down in Buenos Aires, or in someplace in Brazil, and Juan Perón awarded the trophies.
The dictator at the time. The dictator at the time.
So anyway, I call up Mr. Swindeman, and you know, I'm still just 21. And Mr. Swindeman, is there any chance you could come and speak to our club and at our banquet and show some of the films I understand you have? And he had a slide projector deal, you know, that went around. So he gets on, and he started warming up at Toledo Yacht Club at about noon to get his right arm in shape for drinking. And, you know, I meet the guy and I go, oh my God, he's drunker than hell. So, but who's going to say something bad about Walt Swinneman? You know, he's won the Lightning Worlds and everything else 2 or 3 times. So he goes ahead with this show right after dinner, and we still got awards to do. And he shows some pictures of him shaking hands with Juan Perón and some good sailing pictures, and it starts out really well. Well, then these girls down in Brazil were into bikinis way before people in the United States were. And these girls were very proud of their bodies, and they were very willing to show Walt whatever he wanted. And these started going on with these shows and this, and there were some people that took offense to that.
Yeah.
And I knew some of these people were going to, were starting to get their coats, you know, and I'm going, oh my God, what do I do? Well, Les Stahl was sort of an advisor to all of us. And he kind of took me under his wing, and he was sitting next to me. I had him sitting next to me. And I said, Les, what do I do? He says, I'll just stand up and ask for the lights and thank him. I'm going, oh boy, you know, this is going to be good. So I didn't have any choice. I had to do it. So I stood up and I said, somebody want to hit the lights? Thank you, Mr. Swinneman. And he goes, okay. Just back like that. And, you know, he didn't even know I put him down, you know. He was just happy to be done.
Down here somewhere? Somebody had their hand up down here?
I was just going to say, it's very short, but George always told me when he was in the Navy, well, he belonged here since he was 14 years old. And when he got home from the Navy, Jolly Roger had dropped him because he owed $1.75 dues. And so George started the accounting practice down there on Summit, and then pretty soon he was going to do the books here with Jolly Roger. And one of the Commodores came in and they said, George, they called him Cecil. Cecil, if you pay the $1.75, we're going to let you back in, Jolly Roger. And I always thought that was so funny because it actually was true. It's a true story.
Ollie Horning.
Ollie Horning.
Oh my God.
Did he pay the money?
No.
I believe it was I was Commodore that we hired George to do the books that year, so we ended up paying George a little bit, you know, rather than. Who else? Anybody? Please, it's open. Anybody that.
First off, thank you all for being here. This has been one of the most enjoyable times. And I certainly hope that we do something like it in the future again. But as I'm sitting and watching the Commodores come up and speak, it's not lost on me that beside every good Commodore, current and past, there seems to be a very good partner with them. And they should not be overlooked, as they're equally important to these stories.
Definitely, definitely.